Welcome to the 2-Minute Warning interview series, where we take an informative and brief dive into the energy transition and what it means for the Middle East and beyond. We're delighted to have Noura Mansouri join us today. Noura is a research fellow at the King Abdullah Petroleum Studies and Research Center in Saudi Arabia, also known as 𝖬𝗪𝗪. And Noura is also the lead co-chair of the Climate Change and Environment at T20 Saudi Arabia 2020. Thank you, Noura.
Thank you, Michelle. My pleasure.
To start, can you give us a quick overview of the work that the T20 Task Force have been doing, please?
So we concluded a year-long journey of developing 24 policy briefs written by 164 authors and collaborators from all over the world, 26 countries to be precise, on pressing global climate change and environmental challenges that beg for action from the G20 governments. These are all now published on the T20 Saudi Arabia website, which aims to support the G20 climate change and environmental policy making, inform the public on the policy options available that the G20 could use to address these global climate change and environmental challenges, and facilitate policy advocacy through profoundly argued, concrete, and implementable policy recommendations. This accumulates in the ideas bank that the T20 provides to the G20. Since 2012, the T20 helped shape global narratives through evidence-based research and brought national as well as regional concerns to the global agenda through think tank dialogue. These recommendations, of course, are incorporated in the T20 communique, which will be shared with the G20 governments for their consideration in the G20 communique during the G20 summit.
There must be, even beyond what we can see in the released information, there must be vast amount of literature gathered from all those nations, from all those authors in the last year, which sounds like a very busy year. If you had to pin it down to one overarching message from that document, what would that message be? Would it be, we must hurry, we must get a move on?
Sure. The world is facing global challenges from energy security on one end and climate change as an urgent global challenge on the other end. And this year, the Saudi G20 presidency has proposed the circular carbon economy as a framework for addressing climate mitigation goals. We have so many policy briefs that tackle the 4 R's of the circular carbon economy, being reduce, reuse, recycle, and reuse, and remove carbon from the atmosphere.
And part of that circular carbon economy that's been very much pushed and gained support in Saudi Arabia from the G20 in the last couple of months as well, and is gaining a lot of positive momentum. We'll call it CCE for the purposes of this interview. The idea of a circular economy itself is not a new one, but it's become a lot more sophisticated in recent years, and its relevance has become a lot more accelerated for obvious reasons that you just touched upon. But at the moment, of course, 82% of G20 energy supply still comes from hydrocarbons. How would you like to see this number evolve by 2025, by 2030? And can the CCE realize this economic restructuring? So it's a bold, mammoth task. Can we do that?
Indeed, Michelle, G20 members include the world's largest hydrocarbons producers and consumers. It is not so much the energy source, but rather how G20 member countries prevent carbon accumulating in the atmosphere, which will ultimately determine whether the world stays below the Paris Agreement's threshold. Some argue that more emphasis should be put on global general reduction in the use of hydrocarbon fuels. We must acknowledge, though, that while alternative energy sources are expanding, the world continues to rely upon hydrocarbons for the overwhelming share of its overall energy needs, driving both economic and social development. Let us remember that the world is not on track to meet the universal energy access and eradicate the impact on vulnerable communities and meet our Sustainable Development Goal 7 to ensure access to affordable, reliable, and modern energy for all by 2030. At the same time, of course, climate change is an urgent global problem, and the world is also not on track to meet the Paris Agreement and Sustainable Development 13 on climate action. The CCE that's now endorsed, Saudi proposed the CCE, which is now endorsed by all the G20 energy ministers, presents a holistic, integrated, inclusive, and pragmatic approach to managing carbon emissions. And by encompassing the broad range of pathways and options available, CCE considers different national circumstances, including its specific resources endowment and its political, economic, environmental, social, and risk-informed developing context. For instance, the CCE will allow the participation of hard-to-abate sectors. This includes oil, gas, aluminum, steel, iron, cement, and petrochemicals, as well as the heavy transport, including heavy-duty transport, shipping, and aviation. Together, these sectors contribute to a total of 37% of CO2 emissions. So the CCE can be used as an essential means to carbon neutrality through coordinated G20 efforts towards supporting carbon management technology innovations. This will enable collaboration and it will consolidate efforts in upscaling carbon management technologies and incentivize carbon neutralization across hard-to-abate sectors. We have a specific policy brief on this topic, which can be found on the T20 Saudi Arabia website. Amongst the key recommendations under Task Force 2 for the G20 governments include supporting innovation in carbon management technologies, including, but not limited to, negative emission technologies, direct air capture, CCUS, and investing in R&D, etc.
Nora, just on that point, you mentioned about technologies, and the IEA have been very vocal about this recently in the sense that the vast majority of clean technologies and innovations that are required to be able to help us get closer to meeting that Paris Agreement target, by no means a silver bullet, but to give us a realistic chance of that, are available or are in development phases, but they haven't reached commercialization yet. And you're just touching then on the value of technologies within the CCE framework, and it leads us back to that question about time and how the clock is ticking very fast. And obviously CCE is a very valuable and can be a bespoke option for on a national basis rather than a continental or regional basis, which of course has been an age-long argument in this environmental debate that we are not all the same and we can't have blanket policies, and CCE addresses that and fixes that to a large degree. But how quickly can we expect to see in the Middle East, for example, significant progress made on the CCE front?
Yes, honestly, policies that focus on actions to enhance carbon sinks are largely lacking. Presently, sequestration-based geoengineering technologies face two main bottlenecks. First is that there is no well-defined policy framework that effectively incentivize the permanent storage of carbon in non-atmospheric pools. And the second is that carbon sequestration solutions are at various maturity levels, and some are near market viability, and some are in long-term with a long-term potential. So to address this gap, we have another policy brief developed on the topic where we're proposing a phased policy approach that starts as a technology mechanism and leads to balancing the rates of carbon extraction and deposition from and to the geosphere. And G20 governments can do that through strengthening and expanding ongoing international efforts in support of CCUS technologies, as well as placing a value on carbon storage through the proposed carbon storage unit, which is discussed at length at the policy brief, which was developed by global experts in the field. And I have to mention here that in addition to CCUS technologies, there's great potential, for instance, on in nature-based solution. It's an untapped opportunity for carbon sequestration. So oceans are among the greatest victims of climate change, but they're also the greatest mitigators, including the hidden forests in the oceans. That includes the salt marshes, the mangrove, the seagrass meadows, and kelp forests that act as a natural carbon sink, as well as the creatures in the ocean, such as the great humpback whale and its ability to capture carbon and sink it to the ocean. So the role of blue carbon, which is the natural carbon available in the ocean, needs to be strengthened, a nature-based solution as well as ecosystem-based adaptation at international forums.
I think what you just touched on there, I mean, we went from carbon capture, utilization and storage on one end to humpback whales on the other. And I think that really encapsulates what CCE is all about. It is that holistic angle of integrating socioeconomic benefits, economic benefits, purely regional benefits, environmental benefits, and using what we have already as per those 4 R's to create an economic restructuring that is far more sustainable economically and environmentally as well. And you touched on CCS there, and of course, there have been around 30 new integrated facilities and since 2017, according to the IEA, but that still won't help us get to that 2030 target anywhere close, actually, and that's worldwide. So this issue of time and CCE keeps popping up as well. And Abu Dhabi has spearheaded progress with the world's first CCS project for a steel production plant, which is excellent. But again, how can the Middle East accelerate its own CCE journey? What kind of appetite do you see? Obviously, we've seen huge appetite from Saudi Arabia and from G20 members as well. What do you see being do you see a step change by 2025? Of course, that's a very, very short 4 years away. Do you see us having a different approach to CCE and instigating real change by then?
CCUS is gaining global.
No, sorry, for CCE, for the CCE, for the circular carbon economy across the board, from energy efficiency to carbon sinks, as you're mentioning, to CCUS, across the board, the CCE, the concept of that within the Middle East.
Yes, the CCE framework provides a great platform to encompass all the mitigating technologies across the board, taking into consideration, national context. We have, for instance, hydrogen, which is gaining global traction, as well as in the region. Hydrogen is one of the cross-cutting technologies that tackle all the 4 R's of the CCE. So it plays an important role in carbon circularity and neutrality. However, the cost gaps between green hydrogen from renewables as well as blue hydrogen from carbon capture and storage still face significant cost gaps when we compare it to brown hydrogen. The cost of green hydrogen is still 3 to 10 times higher than that of brown hydrogen, while blue. Sorry.
That's quite a bit.
Oh, yeah, and the cost of blue hydrogen is on average twice that of brown hydrogen. So this cost gap must be eliminated to enable the replacement of these greenhouse gas emissions coming from hydrocarbons to a lower carbon and lower greenhouse gas, and also to accelerate the transition of hydrocarbons exporters to be able to export renewables in the form of green hydrogen. If we look at G20 countries, for instance, several G20 countries such as Germany and others in the EU limit the hydrogen use to green hydrogen. By contrast, countries in the UK and the Netherlands aim to actively work with blue hydrogen that uses CCS. Saudi Arabia, on the other hand, has announced the world's largest green hydrogen plant in NEOM, the futuristic city. It's a $5 billion project that aims to produce 650 tons of green hydrogen daily. This, of course, promotes the circular economy. It would reduce carbon, will have benefits to the planet and the people, but will also create a new dynamic industry for Saudi Arabia. So one of the key recommendations under Task Force 2 is to create a dedicated institution that allows the G20 to coordinate national policy responses to support green and blue hydrogen application, including support for lighthouse activities through, for example, bilateral collaboration under Article 6.2 of the Paris Agreement. Such initiative could build on existing activities under for example, Japan in the context of JCM, the Joint Crediting Mechanism for Bilateral Collaboration, and it's underway between Japan and Saudi Arabia. I'm sure you've heard of the world's first shipment of green ammonia going from Saudi Arabia to Japan, which will be used in the power station to produce electricity without carbon. So there's great potential in using hydrocarbon as a reliable, affordable source of low carbon hydrogen and ammonia. And all of this would accelerate a global hydrogen market where the G20 could assess and include policy instruments to support a quick transformation to green hydrogen economies. And develop also baseline and monitoring methodologies for generating emission credits under the market mechanism of the Paris Agreement.